Most people don't realize they're trapped, not by the world outside, but by the thoughts they hold on to inside. You can look calm on the surface, doing all the right things, living the life that's expected of you, but deep down, you're exhausted from clinging to control, clinging to perfection, clinging to who you think you need to be in order to feel safe or loved. And the painful part? We think this is normal. But the Buddha taught something radically different, that suffering isn't just what happens to us, it's what we do with it. It's the attachment, the tight grip, the refusal to flow with the changes of life that keeps us stuck. And yet the moment you truly begin to let go, everything starts to shift. Not in the chaotic way we fear, but in the peaceful, grounded way we've been longing for all along. In today's video, we're diving into what letting go actually looks like. Not as a concept, but as a practice you can carry into your real life. This isn't just about philosophy. It's about finding the kind of freedom the Buddha spoke of. Freedom from the mind's noise, from overthinking, from the exhausting need to control everything. So if you've ever felt like peace is just out of reach, I promise you, what we're exploring today could be the shift you didn't know you needed. And if you appreciate the kind of work we're doing here, bringing you grounded, soul-level teachings rooted in Buddhist wisdom, there's a small, simple favor I'll ask of you. Just hit that subscribe button. And please don't skip any part of this video. Every section carries something meaningful, something that might speak directly to where you are right now. Let's walk this path together. You know that feeling when you're constantly double-checking, planning every outcome, or trying to make sure nothing ever goes wrong? We tell ourselves that if we can just stay one step ahead, if we can think it through enough, fix every flaw, anticipate every move, then we'll finally feel safe. But the truth is, the more we try to control everything, the more anxious and disconnected we become. We mistake control for security, but what it actually creates is tension, fear, and emotional exhaustion. The Buddha pointed this out over 2,500 years ago. What we're really chasing when we cling to control is a sense of certainty in an uncertain world. And because life is always changing, our grip only tightens as we try to resist the natural flow of things. Think about it. How many times have you worried yourself sick trying to control how someone thinks of you, how a situation unfolds, or how the future might play out? And how often did those worries give you peace? Probably never. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, not because we shouldn't care, but because we care in a way that turns love into fear and ambition into anxiety. When we try to force life into our idea of how it should be, we're setting ourselves up to suffer the moment it doesn't go that way, which is often. Control promises peace, but delivers pressure. It's a false safety net that snaps the moment life dares to be life. In Buddhism, the practice of non-attachment isn't about giving up. It's about loosening the grip. It's about showing up fully while letting go of the illusion that you can manage every twist and turn. Because the tighter you hold on, the more you get dragged by what you can't change. And ironically, the moment you start to let go, things start falling into place. Not because you forced them, but because you made space for them. You allowed them to arrive, to grow, to move naturally. Peace doesn't come from gripping tighter, it comes from trusting more, not in a naive way, but in a deeply wise way, the kind the Buddha pointed to when he said that liberation begins not with control, but with understanding the nature of the mind and gently unhooking from what we thought we had to manage. When you release the illusion of control, what's left is something far more powerful: presence. And that's where your peace truly begins. We spend so much of our lives chasing stability, trying to hold everything together so we can finally feel safe. We overthink, overprepare, and overcontrol, believing that if we just manage every detail, we'll somehow prevent things from falling apart. But ironically, it's that very effort, the constant mental gripping, that wears us down the most. The Buddha understood this deeply. He didn't just talk about outer struggles, He spoke directly to the inner tension we carry, the tension that comes from trying to control what was never ours to control in the first place. And what he taught was this: peace doesn't come from getting everything right. It comes from letting go of the need to. Letting go isn't about giving up or becoming indifferent. It's about recognizing the truth of impermanence. Everything is always changing: our relationships, our bodies, our emotions, even our dreams. But when we cling to what we want to stay the same, we end up at war with life itself, and that war is exhausting. It's subtle, but relentless. We resist what is, hoping it will turn into what we think it should be. The Buddha called this tanha, or craving, and craving, he said, is the root of all suffering. When we attach our peace to outcomes, we give away our inner balance every time life doesn't follow our plan. But there's a shift that happens when you begin to let go, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. You begin to see that the things you were clinging to weren't giving you peace, they were just familiar. And familiarity isn't the same as freedom. When you let go, you stop forcing and start flowing. You become more like water, adaptable, open, and quietly powerful. The Buddha compared this to the stillness of a lake. When the wind stops, the water clears. In the same way, when we stop struggling against what is, the mind begins to settle. And it's in that stillness that true clarity rises, not from planning, but from presence. You begin to trust more, you breathe deeper, and even though life is still unpredictable, it doesn't feel threatening anymore, because now you're no longer trying to control the river, you're learning how to float. Letting go won't take all your problems away, but it will change the way you meet them, and sometimes that's all it takes to finally feel free. There's a moment on the path, usually after you've exhausted yourself trying to force things, that something deep inside whispers, "You don't have to keep doing this." It's not the voice of defeat, it's the voice of wisdom. We often think surrender means we're giving up, that we're being weak, or that we're letting life walk all over us. But the Buddha didn't see surrender that way. He saw it as one of the greatest strengths a person can develop, because to surrender doesn't mean to stop caring. It means to stop clinging. It means recognizing when the grip is doing more harm than good, and finally letting the current of life carry you instead of fighting the waves. When you've spent your whole life trying to control outcomes, people, your own emotions, you start to believe that peace is only possible when everything goes exactly the way you want it to. But that belief itself is the trap. It's what creates tension, anxiety, and burnout. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is attachment, our unwillingness to accept the truth of impermanence and change. And surrender is the antidote. It's not passive, it's the most courageous thing you can do. To trust the unfolding of life even when you don't have all the answers, even when you don't feel ready. Think of the times you've tried to hold on to something, maybe a relationship, a job, a version of yourself, long after it had started to drift. That gripping, that pushing, that constant fear of losing, it didn't bring you peace, it brought you pressure. The moment you let go, really let go, something else begins to emerge. It's quiet, but powerful. It's the sense that you never needed to force anything to begin with. What's meant for you has a way of staying, and what's not will fall away no matter how tightly you hold it. Buddhist wisdom doesn't ask you to surrender your dreams. It asks you to surrender your attachment to how those dreams must unfold. It invites you to show up, to act with compassion and awareness, and then release the outcome. Not because you don't care, but because you trust something deeper than your fears. You trust the Dharma, the natural flow of life. And in that trust, you stop resisting the moment and you start waking up to its truth. That's when surrender becomes your superpower, not a sign of weakness, but the beginning of real freedom. There's something deeply frustrating about pouring your heart into something, whether it's a relationship, a dream, a goal, and feeling like the more effort you give, the further it slips away. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it escapes. We're taught that effort equals results, that intensity brings success. But the Buddha saw something else. He saw that when our effort is fueled by clinging, by desperation, fear, or ego, it backfires. And ironically, when we loosen that grip and let go of needing everything to go our way, life often flows more smoothly. That's the paradox of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. That's one of the biggest misunderstandings. It's not about being cold or distant or indifferent. In fact, it's the opposite. Detachment is what allows you to show up fully, with presence, with love, with intention, but without being imprisoned by the outcome. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, because when we tie our identity or happiness to something impermanent, we create the conditions for pain. Nothing lasts forever. Not a job, not a feeling, not even the people we love. And when we resist this truth, we suffer. Detachment is our way of accepting impermanence without losing our peace. Think about how it feels when you're desperate for something to work. Every message that goes unanswered feels like rejection. Every delay feels personal. You start living in a state of emotional tension, always waiting for the external world to give you permission to feel okay. But when you practice detachment, you start moving from a different place. You take action because it feels true, not because it guarantees a reward. You speak your truth without trying to control how it's received. You love without demanding certainty. That's powerful. That's peaceful. The Buddha didn't ask us to stop dreaming or striving. He asked us to notice the suffering that arises when we crave certainty, when we resist change, when we try to force the river to flow our way. Detachment means trusting that you don't have to hold everything so tightly for it to stay. What's meant for you will stay. What's not will teach you. And when you let go of clinging to the result, you open yourself to the beauty of the moment, to the peace that doesn't come from control, but from connection with the present. That's where the real power lives. There's this strange thing we do when we're anxious or unsure. We start thinking more, believing that if we just think harder, longer, deeper, we'll finally figure it out. That one more mental spin will lead to peace. But it doesn't. It just makes us more tired. The Buddha referred to this restless activity of the mind as the monkey mind, always jumping, grasping, leaping from one worry to another. And here's the truth that most of us don't realize until we're completely drained. Overthinking doesn't solve the problem. It becomes the problem. We confuse overthinking with being productive. We think we're solving something when really we're just running in circles inside our own heads. You know that feeling. You're replaying a conversation, imagining all the worst-case outcomes, or endlessly trying to plan for something that hasn't even happened yet. But no matter how many angles you cover, it never brings clarity. It just brings more confusion, more noise, more pressure. And ironically, the more you think, the further away peace seems to be. It's like stirring muddy water. The more you stir, the cloudier it gets. The Buddha taught that the mind is a powerful tool, but only when it's trained. Without mindfulness, it becomes your master instead of your servant. Overthinking is the perfect example of this. It tricks you into believing that if you just keep going, you'll eventually break through. But insight doesn't come from chaos. It comes from stillness. And that stillness can't arise until you stop trying to control everything with your thoughts. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop thinking and start breathing. Seriously, just breathe. Come back to your body. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your breath moving in and out. These aren't distractions. They're gateways back to the present moment where peace actually lives. Because the truth is, peace was never in the answer you were trying to find. It was in the space you were too busy to notice. There was a time when one single thought could ruin my entire day. A quick passing doubt like, "You're falling behind," or They probably don't like you. And suddenly I was spiraling. And I know I'm not alone in this. So many of us live like that, trapped in a mental echo chamber, believing everything the mind throws at us as if it were absolute truth. The Buddha saw this very clearly. He taught that the mind, when left untrained, becomes a source of suffering. It jumps from fear to fantasy, from regret to anxiety, and we follow it like it's our master. But here's the truth. Just because a thought appears in your mind doesn't mean it's real, and it certainly doesn't mean it's you. The Buddha compared the mind to a monkey, restless, noisy, always jumping from one branch of thought to another. And unless we step back and observe, we become the monkey without realizing it. But the moment you become the observer, everything starts to shift. You realize that thoughts are like clouds moving through the sky. They come, they go, they change shape. But the sky, the awareness behind those thoughts, remains untouched. That awareness, that's who you are. Not the storm, not the passing worry, not the negative voice that says you're not enough. You're the one witnessing it all. So many of our painful emotions come not from life itself, but from identifying with these passing mental stories. You don't suffer because the thought, "I'm not good enough," popped into your head. You suffer because you believed it, you gave it power. But what if, instead of reacting, you just watched it pass? What if you met it with kindness, with curiosity, and then let it go? Just like watching a leaf float down a river without needing to follow it? Mindfulness, as the Buddha taught, is the key to this freedom. When we become present, when we notice thoughts instead of getting pulled into them, we start to experience life differently. There's more space, more peace. You begin to realize that your mind will speak, but you don't have to obey. You're allowed to pause, breathe, and choose a different response. And in that space between thought and reaction, something incredible happens. You return to yourself, not the version shaped by fear or habit, but the quiet, steady awareness that was there all along. That's where your freedom lives, not by silencing the mind, but by no longer mistaking it for who you are. Sometimes the reason we feel overwhelmed isn't because life is too fast or too uncertain. It's because we're constantly trying to stay one step ahead of it. We're always planning, adjusting, managing outcomes. It's like trying to walk forward while looking 10 feet in front of you. You miss the ground beneath your feet. And yet, so much of our stress comes from exactly that, wanting the next thing to be perfect before we even take the first step. The Buddha taught that the present moment is the only true reality. The past is memory, the future is a projection. But right now, this breath, this step, is where life actually happens. The more we try to escape it, the more we disconnect from our own peace. When we stop trying to control the story and start listening to what the moment is asking of us, everything begins to soften. The tension in our minds, the pressure in our hearts, the gripping need to make everything go a certain way, all of it loosens. Life stops feeling like something we have to chase and starts feeling like something we can actually be part of. The Buddha encouraged mindfulness not just as a practice during meditation, but as a way of being. He taught that wisdom arises not from always knowing what to do next, but from paying full attention to what's here now. Sometimes that means letting go of your plans. Sometimes it means being still long enough to hear your own inner truth surface. There's a deep kind of intelligence in letting the moment lead. It doesn't mean giving up on your goals. It means surrendering the tight grip you have on how you think things have to unfold. You begin to trust the rhythm of life instead of fighting it. The truth is, some of your most meaningful moments won't happen because you forced them into place. They'll happen because you were open enough to receive them. Maybe not according to your timeline, but in exactly the way your soul needed. When you align yourself with the present moment, something powerful happens. You stop managing life like a to-do list, and you start living it as an experience. That's where peace lives. That's where clarity rises. That's where the path becomes clear, not by controlling it, but by being willing to walk it one conscious step at a time. There's a certain kind of heaviness that sneaks into your life when you start believing it's your job to fix everything for everyone. You feel it when someone you love is struggling and you rush to solve their pain before they even ask. You feel it at work when things fall apart and you jump in to patch the cracks, even though no one asked you to. It's subtle at first. It feels like being helpful, being responsible, being strong. But over time that weight grows, and without realizing it, you start carrying more than your share, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You start believing that peace will only come when everything around you is in order. But the Buddha taught something so different. He taught that peace isn't something you earn through control. It's something you uncover when you stop clinging, especially to roles that were never yours to carry. We often confuse compassion with fixing. We think that love means stepping in, solving, saving. But Buddhism shows us a different kind of love, a quieter, wiser kind. It's the love that knows when to stay close without interfering. The love that can sit with someone in their mess without rushing to clean it up. The love that trusts another person's path, even when it's painful to watch. When we try to fix someone else's journey, we're not just carrying their pain, we're blocking their growth. We rob them of the lessons that come through struggle, through mistakes, through natural unfolding. The Buddha reminded us that each being walks their own path toward awakening. No one can do the inner work for another, and when we try to, we're not offering presence, we're offering pressure. That pressure doesn't just affect others, it consumes you. It builds resentment, burnout, frustration. You start wondering why no one helps you the way you help them. But the truth is you never gave them the space to. You tried to be the glue for everything and everyone, but forgot to hold space for yourself. The practice here isn't abandonment, it's awareness. Before you jump in to fix, pause and ask, is this truly mine to carry? What if my presence, not my solution, is the real medicine? The Buddha taught that clarity arises when the mind is still. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to step back, breathe, and trust that others are capable of walking through their own storm. You are not here to be everyone's anchor. You are here to be your own. And from that steady place, your presence alone becomes a quiet source of strength. We've been taught that if you're not constantly doing something, you're falling behind. That rest is laziness, and being still means you're unmotivated. But what if that belief is actually what's keeping you exhausted, anxious, and disconnected from yourself? What if your endless doing is the very thing clouding your clarity and draining your joy? The Buddha taught that peace doesn't come from doing more. It comes from knowing yourself deeply, and you can't know yourself when you're always running, fixing, striving. Sometimes the most transformative thing you can do is pause. The world constantly pressures us to hustle, to keep achieving, proving, improving. Even when you've done enough for the day, there's that little voice that whispers, do more, be better, stay ahead. But Buddhism invites us to look beneath that voice. Where is it coming from? Is it truth or is it conditioning? The Buddha understood that so much of our suffering comes from craving, wanting to be somewhere else, someone else, doing something else. So we overwork, we fill our days, we chase value through activity, but in the process we forget how to just be. Think of a lotus flower. It doesn't bloom by forcing itself open. It rises slowly from the mud, steady and unhurried, trusting the process. It simply allows. That's what the practice of mindfulness teaches us, to slow down enough to notice the life we're already living. When you let go of the need to constantly perform, you begin to discover the part of you that was never broken, never lacking, never in a rush. That's the part the Buddha pointed to again and again, the stillness within, the presence beneath the pressure. You don't have to do more to be enough. You don't have to hold it all together to be worthy of peace. Sometimes the most powerful act is simply letting go and returning to the quiet truth within you. Thank you for being here, for walking this path with presence and courage. If today's message spoke to your heart, I invite you to watch one of the videos on your screen. It might be exactly what your soul needs next. And as always, thank you for being a part of Buddhist Journey. Until we meet again, may you be still, may you be free, may you be at peace.